a great pleasure for me to be here before you. I say that not just because that's what you're supposed to say at the beginning of the talk, but because I think that you people are the people in the trenches. You people are the people who've done as much as anybody I know to promote literacy. And literacy means something. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As Bruce said, you know, I'm an amateur historian. Because of that, because of my fascination with the past, I like to take a running start. So you're going to have to build that into your, as you take account of what I have to say today. The other thing you're going to have to recognize is something that my friend Peter Christian, who was just elected or re-elected to the Congress here, has said about me many times. That he has a way of twisting themes for his own ends. And so I've twisted the theme of the Piala conference this year to my own end. I hope to a productive one. We'll see. What is a library? When were libraries invented? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to go that far back, but I'd like to remind you that once upon a time there was a city called Alexandria in Egypt. And in Alexandria, this was long before the days of computers and typewriters and such, but in Alexandria, there was something like a few thousand boxes. Each one of these boxes held scrolls on which were printed works. Now that was an important thing. You had to enroll these things this way, and that constituted a library. It constituted a library, but it was a work of immense difficulty in producing these things. It was an innovation. Writing was an innovation. Writing had been introduced 2 years before. But the idea of the Alexandria Library was to preserve in some place or other the wisdom of the past. In other words, not to entrust this to people's faulty memories any longer, but to take the laborious trouble of putting these things on parchments or vellum or whatever else they used so that it could be conveyed to people in the future. And in those days, the only way that you could get this wisdom out was if somebody came in with a bag of gold, dumped it on your desk, and said, I'd like to hire 1 or 2 people as scribes to transfer this to this parchment so that I too can be the proud owner of one of these books. It was primitive, but it was an attempt to conserve the best of the past. It was an attempt to bring people in touch with the rest of the world. And it was the beginning of what we do now. Fast forward a little bit to the recent past in Micronesia. We have our own history here. The history that I was familiar with in the 70s when Dan Peacock was the director of library services up in Saipan after he had served as librarian here in Pohnpei in the old Pips school. In those days, we were trying to give people access to books and print materials because libraries were small and struggling. And so what he was doing was having somebody in Guam copy out news clippings and sending these news clippings in envelopes to all of the small libraries around the trust territory. I don't know if any of you people remember that, but I have those still. They're bound in our library. They're a treasure of sorts from the past. Dan Peacock it was who sent around produced copies of Lee Wu and Captain Henry Wilson. We were talking about that before, but the account of the Palau Islands. Books that most of us wouldn't have been able to obtain. He was sending out notices of publications that we could draw on, to build up our library. We needed somebody like that. We needed somebody in the driver's seat, somebody who was at the head of a network, who was enriching the libraries that were just starting. We needed somebody who was thinking of bookmobiles and bookmobiles and bringing resources to people. We needed something because it was an early period in the modernization of Micronesia. It was a time when we were just getting into big-time government. We were just moving in the implications of the cash economy. We were just starting to send people off to colleges in great numbers. Remember, that was the time, that was just a couple of years after the Pell Grant became available to Micronesians. And so we needed the development of literacy. We needed someone who would help open people's minds to the great world that they were entering. But that wasn't all it was doing. It was also helping us, and I'm not sure if this is appreciated well enough, it was also helping us recapture something of the past here in Micronesia. One of the books he sent was a thing by Frank LeVar called Material Culture View of Truck, I think it was called at that time. And in 1977, we had the ordination of the first Chuukese priest in Mwach. That's the present bishop, Armando Samo. The people of his island wanted to put up a FAUS, a men's house, an oot, in the lagoon, or a nas. They wanted to put that up for the celebration, and as a way of honoring him. The problem was they forgot, or perhaps they never knew, how to tie the knots that were distinctively Mortlakese that went into this kind of a building. And so they sent word to us. We were Mike, Sem, and Chuk in those days. We copied the book, sent it back to them, and they built the FAUS. This is not self-congratulatory. It's simply a way of saying that these materials that we talk about, with access to the wisdom, are not just the wisdom of other places. They're our own wisdom as well. I mentioned the news clippings that Dan Peacock sent out. For the past 18 months, we've had a young volunteer working on a history book for FSM. This will be finished next month. Actually, it'll be finished in about 3 weeks, we hope. But this history book this author is running into trouble as he's looking through the 1970s, the early years of the Congress of Micronesia. He's trying to find first-hand accounts of things that happened. The burning of the Congress building, Congress of Micronesia building in Saipan in 1971, the speeches that people gave extolling free association, or independence, or commonwealth. I pointed him to those news clippings that Dan Peacock sent out a long time ago. He came down excited. He said, this is a treasure chest. And so he's converting this into a product that's going to help educate our young people. The goals of that day, and I think the goals still, are first of all, to allow us and our people to link with other parts of the world. We're still in a modernization era. Our future still depends on our ability to relate to other parts of the world. People in our libraries can explore Antarctica if they want. They can find out what they need to know about grizzly bears or polar bears. They can find out what the climatic conditions are in the steppes in Mongolia or in China. They can deepen their knowledge about the U.S. and Asia. They can become, in other words, members of the world community as we begin to modernize and embrace these parts of the world ourselves. The second thing that they can do is deepen our understanding of our own society, our own history and culture, and that's from materials in print. I pointed out a couple months ago to some people who were visiting our library looking for education materials that the Palm Project in Hawaii during the 1970s was wildly producing local language materials. Chuukese materials, Pohnpeian materials, Kosraean materials, there's a whole range of these things. Now, when I visited a state not so long ago, it was a year and a half ago, I asked somebody about this. The response was, scratch head. In other words, nobody had heard, at least the people in that particular department hadn't heard of this. Why not? These are local materials. These are on CDs. All you have to do is print on request, basically. And what you're doing is using materials that were developed 30 years ago for education purposes. But of course, you have to stay in contact with the schools to find out what are the relevant materials. The third thing that it can do is contribute to literacy, as I suggested. That it can help us transition from orality. Orality, that period of time, and that was a long period in the lifespan in the history of Micronesia, as it was in the history of the world, where we got information by talking and by listening. Help these people, help ourselves get information from the printed page. But the library today is even more of a challenge. The library today is much more than just books, particularly with the expansion of electronic communications. Yes, it includes books for sure, but it also includes what Jane and other people are fond of calling gray material. I didn't know what that was until a couple of years ago, but I sure understand it now. Gray material is stuff that doesn't come out nicely bound. Gray material is stuff that the government puts, it might be loose leaf, it might be just photocopies of things. But it's stuff that tells its own story. Story very often of what's happening today, not yesterday. And it needs to be collected. At least if sometime in the future we hope to tell other people the story of what's happening today. The library today includes other resources, of course. Internet, the big one. MySpace, Facebooks, forums of all sorts. A tremendous resource for getting information in and out of the island. Very soon we're going to have fiber optic cable. April 1st is what I was told by somebody in the Marshalls, Tony Muller. And whether it's on that day or not, the opportunities for contact this way and that way are going to expand enormously. And it's very important for us to be in a position, it's very important for our libraries to be in a position to utilize this. Email and internet, that I tell people all the time, I think the greatest spur to literacy in the islands was email. People email, people who would never, they would have dropped dead before they ever sent a letter. Would think nothing of spending half a day on the internet now, on a computer, reading and writing, but electronically. But then again, we also have something else in the library today. We have these media of different sources. Music, photos, videos, on islands and on the rest of the world. All of these become tools for educating our people. There's an embarrassment of riches today, an enormous quantity of material. In fact, so much that we need help in deciding what to invest in and what to acquire for ourselves and the people that we serve. That means, friends, we've got to keep the antennas out or up. That means that we've got to keep arms linked. That means that we have to keep contact with schools, with governments, with businesses for ideas on what is needed, what is more important than what. We don't have unlimited resources, but there's almost unlimited resources out there to tap in on. And I think that the point of the conference was ordering materials, acquiring materials for our libraries to serve those people out there. But that depends on something else. And that something else is an effective network. So, my vision for today, and I suppose you could say, what I'm trying to foist off on you is a network. No man is an island, no woman is an island, no library is an island. The only way libraries will survive in the future, even right now, is by networking, by collaborating. There has to be a collaboration of universities and specialized libraries, as there was in the past in Alexandria. If a wealthy man who is interested in literacy wanted a text, he had to go to the major library in Alexandria. Today, our work depends on a collaboration of universities and specialized libraries. What I'm talking about here is COM, FSM, MARC, the university college libraries, our own Micronesian seminar, these kinds of libraries with public and school libraries. Let's not pretend that we can do this whole thing ourselves, alone. We can draw specialized materials from these sources, but help to replenish them with materials. In other words, we can have a system, a network, that profits both the people out there in the villages or in our different towns and the places that are supposed to be the dispensers of materials. The Pohnpei project I was referring to before, it is on CDs, it's available. And there are many ways of getting this thing, but when you come to Mike's tomorrow morning, those of you who will be there at that early hour, you will see the opportunities for acquiring this, and I'm sure you can at the other libraries too, or other materials that you need. Recently, Piala has been interested in undertaking a project on translating the German Hamburg expedition volumes. There's 5 volumes in German. Not many Palauans speak German or read German. That's understandable. It can be translated. Half of it has been translated. Where are those translations? Many of the colleges have these translations on hand. The same thing, by the way, goes for the other places as well. We have material, we have translations from Pohnpei of the volumes on Pohnpei. We have translation of Nevermond's volume on Raleigh Rada in the Marshalls. You know, all these things are available. We have material on current economic and political issues. Again, when I say we, what I'm talking about is myself as a representative of these, you might say, major libraries, whose holdings are a little bit more extensive. It's our mission to share these things with other people who need them. We don't want to dust them off and contemplate these things with reverence periodically. We'd like to get these materials into the hands of people who can use them, and that's you. But at the same time, you can contribute to this pool of material that some of the larger libraries have. I think Jane's project, this Greenstone project, is an attempt, a very strong attempt to do just that. By creating a digital library that can be shared, this in itself is a step towards building the network that I've been trying to describe. You perhaps should be looking at the materials in these libraries when you go around to see what else should be digitized, what else should be made available to people, what's going to serve their needs best. We'd also like to ask you to contribute to this pool of data. We'd like to ask you, as I shamelessly did, to bring copies of local reports, gray materials, to meetings like this. We would appreciate having this. It saves me the trouble of going around, knocking on every government door, because I'm sorry to say the mailing list has not been invented yet in most of our islands. It saves me the trouble, and it also makes these things, of course, available for other people who use them. And I think you'd be surprised to find out how many people do. This network that I keep talking about is still a vision, not a reality. Most of us find ourselves taking care of our own library, looking to take care of doing our own work. Of course, that's the way things are. We meet yearly on opportunities, occasions like this, to share ideas and spend time together, to bond. But we still really haven't done as much in collaboration as we should, even several years after the founding of Piala. Let's begin now. So I'm challenging you to establish this network. Not a paper network, but a real network. A network that's going to make a difference in the way you serve your people, in the way we are able to serve our clientele. When you visit our library, the college library, other places on the island, I'd ask you, and I think I speak for them too, to let us know what you need. And that could include materials that you may want digitized under the Greenstone project, or perhaps independently. My hope, as I said, is that you people act as a channel for the other libraries to acquire materials from your place. I think if we do this, we make a real, honest effort to achieve this. We'll be helping one another to enrich our people, and we'll be establishing the kind of a network that's long overdue here. We'll become the modern-day version of the Alexandria Library.